This this happened when I was really young. I'm talking second or third grade. It's hard for me to remember things clearly from that far back, but this memory, it stands out for reasons you'll soon understand. It was a school day, and it had been raining just cats and dogs all day. After picking me up from school, my parents left for some upscale event. I can't remember if it was a fundraiser or a dinner party, something like that. Either way, they were supposed to come back home that night. But while they were gone, the storm it picked up like crazy. It became unsafe to drive. So instead of coming home, they reluctantly decided to spend the night at a friend's house, much closer to where they were. I remember them calling me on the house phone, apologizing over and over for leaving me there by myself, even though I insisted I'm not even hungry, I'll be fine. My mom gave me a list of things to do before bed. Lock all the doors and windows, keep at least one house light on, make sure all the blinds were closed. You know, typical stuff. At the time, I didn't get why they were making such a big deal about it. I wasn't old enough to realize how wrong it was to leave a kid my age home alone. In fact, I was actually kind of excited. It meant unlimited candy and no bedtime. I didn't have a TV in my room, so I just stayed downstairs in the living room watching the big TV on the couch. I told myself I'd do all that stuff my mom asked right before going to sleep, since I was planning on staying up all night anyway. But at some point, the sugar crash got me. I fell asleep. No surprise there. I don't remember what time I woke up, but it was late. The TV had gone into sleep mode, so 3 hours minimum. And I distinctly remember being so much colder when I woke up. Nothing too out of the ordinary. I mean, temperatures drop at night, but the difference was significant. Enough for me to instantly notice. I thought about just curling back up, but then I remembered my mom's list. Even at that age, I knew she'd find out if I didn't do it, and I really didn't want to get in trouble. Not after she trusted me. So I forced myself off the couch. I went to check the windows and doors. I went around, did everything she asked. Locked the front and back doors, closed all the blinds, checked the windows, even left the light on. Everything was shut. Tight. Which confused me because the house still felt way colder than it should have. I even put my hand against a couple of the windows checking for cracks, but they were all sealed. I figured maybe the storm knocked out the heater. I didn't think much more about it. That explanation made sense, and I was just so tired. So I headed upstairs to my room, ready to just crawl into bed. When I got to my room, I finally realized how bad the storm had gotten. The living room is tucked into the center of the house, so you can't hear it from down there. But my bedroom has this big external window, and I could hear everything. The rain was just slamming against the glass, like it was trying to get in. And every minute or so, a burst of lightning, followed by this just deafening clash of thunder. I wasn't scared of storms, but I do remember being worried that a tree was going to fall on the house. That's probably why I had trouble falling back asleep, even though I'd been dead tired just 20 minutes before. As I was lying there, listening, I started picking up on these odd sounds. Every so often, these weird creaking sounds, like shifting wood. The thing is, the entire upstairs floor is carpeted, so it couldn't have been coming from my room. At first, I thought, it's just a tree swaying in the wind. But the sound didn't quite fit. Even then, I knew what a thunderstorm sounded like. This wasn't one of them. It started bothering me. It wasn't the storm keeping me up anymore. It was that stupid sound. I couldn't take it. I sat up, looked around the room, not really sure what I was looking for. I just listened, trying to drown out the storm and focus on the creaking.
Lightning flashed, lit up the whole room. Everything looked normal, but my eyes were drawn to the only wooden thing in the room, the closet. The room went dark again. I sat there, perfectly still. About a minute later, lightning flashed again. My room was lit up for just a split second, and in that split second, I saw something that made me choke. The closet door. It was slightly ajar. It had been closed before. I was 100% sure of it. Something had opened it. There was something in my room. I didn't scream. I didn't speak. I didn't even think. I got out of bed as quietly as I possibly could, and I walked out of the room. That walk from my bed to that door, it felt like a 500-mile, 5-year journey. I immediately went downstairs and I hid under the dining room table. Then, and only then, I started to cry. I didn't know what else to do. There was someone or something in my house, in my room, and my parents were too far away to help me. I don't know how long I stayed under that table, but at one point, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. I held my breath. I knew that any sound I made could end my life. But these weren't normal footsteps. It wasn't step, step, step. It was this chaotic shuffling and thudding, like something was tumbling down the stairs, but on purpose. The sounds got closer. Scrape, thud. Closer. They were coming straight for the dining room, straight for me. It knew where I was hiding. I clamped my hand over my mouth, trying not to breathe. And then, from under the table, I saw them. Just bare feet. 2 bare feet. But they were, oh God, they were nasty, caked in wet mud, and they had this sick yellowish tint. The legs were covered in cuts, deep, angry-looking cuts, like they'd been crawling through thorn bushes. It was stumbling, lurching, struggling to even stand upright. And just as I thought I was going to die from fear, it dropped something. A heavy clang on the floor. It was a wrench, a big, heavy metal wrench. It took every fiber of my being not to scream right then. If that thing bent down to pick it up, it would see me. It would be over. With wide eyes, I just watched as that person, that thing, stood still, not picking up the wrench, but not walking away either. It just stood there. It felt like a standoff where any wrong move could end my life. Eventually, it finally continued walking. I couldn't see it anymore. I listened as the chaotic footsteps stomped and stumbled around the first floor for what felt like an eternity. And then, finally, the front door opened and shut. It was gone. I stayed hidden under that table for a long, long time after that. Part of it was fear, but another part was just trauma. Just remember being shaken. The rest of the night, it's kind of a blur. I picked up the wrench off the floor. I didn't want my parents to find it. After making sure the front door was locked again, I slunk back upstairs, crawled into bed, and somehow fell asleep. Everything went back to normal after that. For whatever reason, I was terrified to tell my parents. I didn't want them to find out I hadn't locked the doors right away, so I just kept the whole thing to myself. It wasn't until several years later that I finally told them, and it actually took some convincing for them to believe me. Looking back, Not telling them the moment it happened was an awful decision. This experience, it traumatized me. I slept with a nightlight from then on. I developed a fear of the dark that didn't go away for a long, long time. I still have trouble explaining what happened that night, but I learned my lesson. Lock your doors. This happened over the course of maybe 3 or 4 years when I was a kid. I can't remember exactly when I got the first one, but I started having this recurring, half-lucid nightmare. Maybe once every couple of months. From what I can remember, here's how it would go. I'd be lying in bed, only the view, it wasn't from my own eyes. Instead, I'd be looking down at myself from the ceiling, like I was viewing my own bedroom through a security camera. This out-of-body thing, it always freaked me out. I'd try to float or swim towards my body, but I was never able to move. I was just stuck up there. I was half lucid, so I knew it was a dream, but that didn't make me any less scared. After calming myself, I'd start noticing strange things about my bedroom. For one, the digital clock on my nightstand, it would always be counting in reverse. That was usually the first strange detail, and once I noticed that, I'd start seeing other weird stuff. There were these drawings taped to random spots on the walls. Crayon drawings, like you'd expect from a kid my age, but I had no memory of ever making them. I wasn't the kind of kid who ever drew much. They always showed the same thing. A row of people holding hands, all smiling these wide, stretched-out smiles, with one smaller figure, who I can only imagine was supposed to be me. They were always standing in front of a house with a blue roof. The other detail that still sticks out to me is an old toy train of mine. It was always sitting in a different spot on my bedroom floor, which was significant because I had lost that particular toy years prior. Anyway, after analyzing my room, I'd get this unexplainable urge to look out my bedroom window. I'd glance over, and as if it were on cue, a man would appear. Just inches from the glass.
I just stared at the page, confused. I had never spoken a single word to this Samuel kid. I just chalked it up to some weird kid being weird. The school year was over. I stopped thinking about it. A few hours passed. I'm at home, hosting a sleepover in my basement with my best friends, Kevin, David, and Kieran. We're just eating Doritos, playing Call of Duty all night. My parents' bedroom was 3 floors above us, so we didn't have to worry about noise. We were messing around on my dad's rowing machine, sometime just before 2 a.m., when we heard it. A sharp knock at the storm door, the basement door. The sound, it instantly silenced us. Who the hell would knock on the storm door? It must have been someone who either didn't want to wake my parents or knew we were down there, or both. It didn't make sense. The person kept knocking, same rhythmic pattern. I could tell Kieran was about to say something, and I couldn't stop him in time. In this loud, assertive voice, he just yells, "Who's there?" I wanted to knock him out. He had basically just broadcasted to whoever was out there that we were down there. My basement doesn't have any external windows. They couldn't have known we were there. But now they did. After a long pause, no more knocking, a muffled voice answered back. It said, "Come around to the back door." It was a high-pitched voice. It sounded cheerful, like he was a friend of ours. It was definitely a teenager's voice. I was pretty scared. My friends, though, they were seemingly unfazed, like they thought it was exciting. They insisted that I at least check it out, and they pressured me into it. We crept upstairs, careful not to make noise.
I approached the back door, slowly, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. Through the narrow glass pane beside it, I could see a shadowy figure standing under the dim light. I got a little closer, and his face came into view. My jaw nearly hit the floor. It was him. It was that kid, Samuel Robinson III, the one who had signed my yearbook. My friends went to go open the door, God knows why, but I stopped them. I know who that is. I explained what had happened, and that changed their mood a bit. Keep in mind, Sam was still standing outside while we were talking, and he could definitely see us. He must have noticed how freaked out I was because he started motioning to the side of the house, like he wanted me to go over to the window. I wasn't opening the door for him. Instead, I went over to my kitchen window and I cracked it open, just a tiny bit. My friends followed. He walked over to the window. I asked him what he wanted. I told him I recognized him from the yearbook. He said, "Oh, so you got my message." And he introduced himself as Sam. Then he went on to say that he always watched me from afar, that we could have been good friends. I just agreed with him, just so I wouldn't piss him off. I had to know, so I asked him, how did he know where I lived? He didn't respond, just smiled. Before I could de-escalate, David called him a creepy stalker and told him to piss off. Sam's smile disappeared. He tilted his head, like he didn't understand. Then, just as quickly, his expression twisted into something I can only describe as pure hatred. He went from passive, almost friendly, to aggressive, angry. He started screaming things at me, how he hated my friends, how we should all die, how my ex hated me, and just random personal stuff he had no right knowing. He reached toward the window and tried to force it open. I jammed it shut and locked it. He started snarling at the window, banging on it like an animal. We must have caused so much commotion because my parents came rushing down the stairs. That's when Sam ran away. I told my parents what happened. My dad raced outside in his underwear. He came back a few minutes later, said he had no idea where the kid went. My parents didn't call the police. They just told us to go back to sleep. The next morning, they contacted the school. That's when we learned the disturbing truth. Sam had been expelled a few weeks before the year finished. He shouldn't have ever been at the school on the last day. The yearbooks were printed before his expulsion, which explained why his picture was still in it. That meant he had snuck into the school just to write me that message. Despite working with the school, nobody could track Sam down. It was like he and his parents didn't exist. To this day, I still have no idea how he knew where I lived. That's what freaks me out the most. The running theory is that he was, troubled, and he took a strange liking to me, and then he stalked me for who knows how long. Living in that same house, it's never felt the same ever since. This happened a couple of years ago. I was 22, fresh out of college. One random weekend, my closest friend from college, Lindsay, invited me and our other two friends, Sabrina and Thea, to spend a few days at her family's beach house. From the way Lindsay talked about it, the place sounded like a dream. Quiet, tucked away on its own private beach. Lindsay's family is loaded, so I had a feeling her beach house would be insane. And I was far from disappointed. Look, I'm no architect, but I know a modern-style house when I see one, and Lindsay's must have been ultra-modern, because it looked more like a covert military safe house than a personal home. The four of us stayed in the same room, 2 sets of bunk beds. We'd been staying there 3 nights. I know I have a boring lifestyle, but if there was a time to drink, it was that weekend. We wanted to keep the first night pretty chill, though. So we walked down to the private beach and sat in the sand, stargazing. We were drinking White Claws, listening to music, when we noticed something in the distance. It was this faint, flickering light emanating from somewhere further down the shore. The four of us quieted down and just watched the light flicker on and off. It was kind of hypnotic, as eerie as it was.
After a while, it became clear the light was swinging back and forth, like a handheld flashlight. And soon after, we realized that's just what it was. It looked like 3 or 4 people, casually walking in our direction. As they got closer, we started hearing laughter, which caused all of us to relax a bit. One of them yelled out, "Hi," in a friendly voice. It was a guy's voice. Thea yelled back. As they approached, we could see it was a group of 3 guys. They looked maybe a year or 2 older than us. They sat down with their beers, and the 7 of us continued drinking. It was actually a really great time. Fast forward an hour, and several drinks later, and they ultimately invited us back to their place. Personally, I was exhausted. I was leaning towards going to sleep, but I could tell all 3 of my friends wanted to continue hanging out, especially Thea. I decided not to spoil everyone's fun. I called it a night for myself, telling my friends to go on without me. There were only 3 guys after all, and I had no intention of hooking up with anyone. I walked back towards Lindsay's house, while the 6 of them walked along the beach. I washed up and went to bed. Sometime after 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to a FaceTime call from Lindsay. This was confusing. She should have either been home by then or asleep. I answered her in this groggy voice, and what she said woke me up instantly. She basically screamed into the phone that Thea and Sabrina had been kidnapped, and I needed to get her car immediately. Her words were like a bucket of ice-cold water. I've never felt a more intense sense of fear and adrenaline. I didn't waste a second. My hands were literally shaking as I threw on clothes and sprinted down the stairs. I asked her why she had called me instead of the police. She reassured me she already had. She told me to stay on the line as she walked me through it. With her instruction, I managed to open the driveway gate, find her car keys, and speed out of there. She told me they were about 10 houses down the beach to the left. She described the car, told me what direction it had gone in, and I slammed on the gas to try and catch up. There wasn't a single car on the road. I was driving at an insanely unsafe speed. After a few minutes, I noticed a car, matching Lindsay's description, driving slowly in the distance. Then I hung up the phone, called the police myself, and told them exactly where we were. The dispatcher told me to keep my distance, so as not to alert them. So that's what I did. After what felt like forever, I spotted cop lights up ahead. The car in front of me didn't try to evade. I pulled my car over and watched everything unfold. It was pure chaos. The cops forcibly removed all 3 men from the SUV at gunpoint. They put them in cuffs. Then one of the officers walked over to the trunk of the car and pulled it open to reveal both Thea and Sabrina, bound and, by the looks of it, pretty badly bruised. As horrifying as that was, it was nothing compared to their perspective. After I went to bed, they all continued drinking. At some point, the guys Thea and Sabrina were with suggested they all go to bed. So the 4 of them split off while Lindsay told the 3rd guy she was going home. He was really upset about that. He got angry, they yelled at each other, and he ended up telling Lindsay to get the hell out of his house, which she was more than happy doing. Halfway home, though, she realized she had forgotten her purse. So she went back to get it. That's when she saw them. The guys throwing Thea and Sabrina into the back of the car before driving off. She called the police, then me. Turns out the house they were staying in didn't even belong to them. It was owned by some random old couple who were on vacation. That, plus the slew of other crimes,
put them away for a long time. I think the craziest part is the fact that had I not gone home, I might not have been able to reach Lindsay's car in time. And had it not been for that, the police may never have found them. This happened just last year. My buddy Jimmy, he hosts these big electronic music events. Jersey Shore, New York. He lets me and my friends come for free, hang out in the VIP. He was hosting a huge event the weekend of July 4th, biggest one yet. Me and my other friend Ryan, we got a bit of a head start on the alcohol. By the time the first DJ started, we were more than a little buzzed. Fast forward a couple hours, and Ryan and I were completely wasted. It was getting to that point in the night where you either figure out how you're getting home or who you're going home with. We danced over to the bar, started talking to some girls. Before long, we had it figured out. I'm probably botching their names, but I'm fairly certain they introduced themselves as Gianna and Marcella. This is where my ability to recall events becomes a bit hazy. From what I can remember, it was actually Marcella who suggested we all leave together. Gianna handed the two of us a drink and insisted that we get on their level. After downing the drinks, the four of us started moving towards the exit. The moment we stepped outside, Marcella suggested we go back to her place, right on the beach. She insisted her beach house was definitely nicer than whatever inland Airbnb we found. We walked along the beach, talking. The girl seemed really intelligent. I remember finding it so refreshing. That's when I realized I actually was feeling drunker than I had been 15 minutes earlier. But it wasn't a drunk I was used to. I felt like my body was melting under my weight, as if I were going to collapse. My legs felt flimsy, almost like cardboard. Moving my limbs, my mouth, even my eyes became increasingly more difficult. There was a moment where my extremities started feeling a little numb. But then, just as quickly as the feeling arose, it passed. Back to normal drunkenness. Just then, we arrived at the beach house. It was insane. We went inside, and wow. Not 15 minutes after stepping foot in the house, Ryan and Marcella had disappeared, which left me alone with Gianna. She leaned in to kiss me, and that's the last thing I remember. Not her kissing me, her leaning in to kiss me. That's where everything cuts off. I don't remember feeling woozy again. I don't remember drinking more. Nothing. There is a huge gap in my memory, spanning several hours. And the thing is, I know I didn't just pass out. Because there are texts on my phone sent from me, proving I was still conscious. There's digital proof that I was sentient, but I don't remember one bit of it. This was different from a normal blackout. Plus, Ryan experienced the exact same thing at the exact same time. That is way too specific to be a coincidence. Here's the next thing I remember. Waking up with the sun directly overhead. In a random set of bushes, over an hour away from where the event was. My phone wasn't in my pocket. In fact, nothing was in my pocket. My wallet, my keys, all gone. But it gets worse. It wasn't even my pocket to begin with. I was wearing someone else's clothes, not Ryan's, a complete stranger's. The only personal belonging I still had was my shoes. And even those were messed up. Both shoes had the shoelaces removed, and they were soaking wet. My head was pounding. Everything felt disoriented, like waking up from anesthesia. Bushes, someone else's clothes, no wallet, no phone, no keys. Based on my shoes, it was like I had been in the water recently. The worst part was the blankness. I genuinely couldn't remember anything past Gianna leaning in. That's when the panic started to creep in. I wasn't just hungover. I was scared. How did I get here? What if I'd crashed a car? What if someone drugged me? I stood up, realized there wasn't a single landmark around me. It didn't look like a beach town, just trees. But just across the street, maybe a few hundred feet away, was a 7-Eleven. I asked the guy behind the counter if I could use his phone. I was just about to call the police when, what do you know, Ryan walks into the same 7-Eleven. We just stared at each other. He then told me his version, and you guessed it, the same story. Damn near identical.